Again.
We are recording. It is July 7th, 12:30. We're here for our youth and City of Port Orange negotiations. We'll go around the room. I'm Heather Carrizales, HR Manager of the city.
Matt Jones, City Attorney.
Rick Curtis, Human Resources.
Carly Meek, Assistant City Attorney.
Interim Chief Bill Proctor.
Jared Alvasados, Vice President of Port Orange Union.
Jerry Wilson, attorney for the union.
Justin White, President of the Union.
Warren Carter, Board Member of the Union.
All right, so you guys got some feedback on the educational agreement?
Yes. I just have a couple questions about it. I looked at it, reviewed it. From a legal standpoint, I think it's fine on paragraphs 4 through 7 are the ones that I was most concerned about. But is it saying that the city could recover anything above minimum wage if someone doesn't fulfill their 3-year term? Is that right? Is that right? Okay. But in addition to that, it goes on to allow for recovery of the tuition and the uniforms and equipment and the cost of screenings. And it appears to only give the person 30 days to do that. Is that right? The concern I have is if someone leaves under these circumstances, I don't see how anybody could afford to repay it within 30 days. So I think it's legally fine, so long as someone's paid minimum wage. But then on top of that, you're saying that you also have to repay all of these things and do so within 30 days. It gets into the issue of, the lawyers know, of something called unconscionability. Is it unconscionable to impose this on someone to say, and you got to pay us all back? So I guess what we would ask is, and this applies to recruits, correct?
That is just for like academy students, right? Not sworn officers that are hired.
It's for police recruiting.
Okay. Just for going into the academy though. This isn't like someone that's hired and doing the 3-year contract.
Well, so that's a good question. Have we had a lot of direct out of, I guess, another agency, or, I mean, I can't even recall the last.
For example, we hired one today as he'll start as a sworn on August 3rd.
Okay.
And then the past has been, or during the training days, they've been for equipment and stuff.
So that would fall into this, where they pay the 100% for the first year, 75 for second, and 58 third year. That after your 3rd year, your contract's done.
Pretty much over with at that point.
And so like on page 2 under 5B, I mean, how much is the tuition in today's dollars for the academy? Just out of curiosity.
We're paying close to 3. I can get you an exact number, but it's close to 3.
Okay. Then it says under 5C, the cost of all uniforms. So it's not just a return of the uniforms, but I guess they return them. Are you saying they return them and they pay the cost?
Yeah, I think it is.
The shirts are being embroidered.
Okay.
So we wouldn't be able to
Do they have to wear the police uniform at the academy, or do they wear like a polo?
I don't know for sure.
Or a class B, where you can see them with name tags?
I think all they're getting at the academy is a patch, because we don't want them.
Yeah, no badge.
So they're wearing a patch. But when they start with us, then they're going to wear the shirt.
So they're wearing the summer shirt, in essence, like the shirt with a patch.
Yeah, I think we're paying for their uniform at the academy.
Okay, the academy's uniform. Okay.
Okay. And during these, when they're in the academy, they're obviously not certified yet, right? They're a trainee. Are they even doing ride-alongs during that time?
They will if they're off. So if they're at the academy, they're there full-time, handling classes. But if they divide the class, one half goes to firearm, the other half is off. At that time they're off, they come back to work. They'll do ride-alongs, they'll do policy studies,
Okay,
HR jobs, whatever they have to do.
okay. All right, thank you, Chief. So do we know a cost estimate on the uniforms and equipment? What, any ballpark on what that would run?
I get it for it.
Okay. So, and then the medical and psychological evaluation, the cost of the drug screen. I guess what I'm asking is, on the totality of B, C, and D under 5, we had an idea that might.
I can tell you the physical in today's dollars is $678 and the psychological evaluation is $325. So you're at $1,000 just for the pre-employment.
And then the drug screen is,
That's included. So it's $643 for the physical and $35 for the drug screen. So $678 total for pre-employment.
we're looking at $1,000 there. Let's say uniforms are 500 or even 1,000. So you're probably looking at about $5,000. The suggestion I would have, and see, certainly anybody else on the union board here weigh in, would be maybe extending the repayment period. I think it's paragraph 8 that says 30 days. I mean, if they can pay it within 30 days, maybe you incentivize them by giving them
A discount.
a 5% discount or 10% if they pay it within, but other than that, 90 days. I can envision someone who, I heard of one situation, don't even know the name, it's not important, of a new recruit in DeLand. We were at the bargaining table and he shared this, that they had just had a new recruit. And the lady got her uniform and got in her car and she said she immediately felt like this wasn't the right job for her. And that was after she'd gone through the training, criminology major in college, thought this was her career. And then, if you hit somebody with it, but now you're leaving us, but you got to pay us back $5,000 within 30 days. It might, and I would suspect the city would be open to some sort of a payout period or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way to just not scare off, because I think what you end up happening is that information would get back to the recruits and it might be hesitant for someone to go, well, crap, I don't know if I want to sign that if they're going to make me pay that back. And I know what the intention is, and I think we all have the same idea. We don't want people who are just trying to get a free cert from us. And I think we've ran into that issue before where we get people that want to get a free certificate and decide, thanks, I don't want to work here. And I completely understand the city trying to get back that cost. Even when Chief Grimaldi was talking about the uniform stuff, and I know that it was brought up about the shirt costs, and do we give them just a patch? Do we give them a full shirt? Do we give them something that stands them out? And that's why I think they settled on the patch to give them a little bit of identification through the school, proudness, but we're still preserving some of that cost.
And we do appreciate the management of the city reaching out and asking for our input on this, because this is the kind of thing we would like to work with you, because it benefits everybody to not, to echo what Jared said, we understand why you would want to recover these expenses if you've invested in somebody. You want a 3-year commitment or some sort of penalty if they leave. And I don't think it's totally unreasonable. Only the payback period is the part that, as as Jared said, we wouldn't want that to scare somebody off.
I gotta tell you, I came certified and signing that contract ticked me off. If everybody else around didn't have one, I would not have signed it. Because they didn't invest any money in me. I was already certified through the test, and I had 5 years experience when I came here. It is a detriment to recruiting if other people aren't doing it. I'm gonna tell you right now, because I would not have signed it if everybody else didn't have it.
Warren, you know if other agencies have it right now?
Daytona did at the time in the sheriff's office. I didn't apply with them, but St. John's Sheriff's Office did have it at the time. But if we're looking for ways to attract experienced officers, I think it's fair to want the uniform money back, but charge them for a vest that they're returning and that's really the big money item in the uniform, is a little much. And then making them sign, already being experienced officers, a 3-year contract, or they got to pay back. what, it's 150 and 25, is that what it is?
Yeah, 175.
175 and 50, so a guy stays 2.5 years, he's already experienced, he's gotta pay 50%.
And the training is for experienced guys, less than 6 months.
Well, now I guess,
PTO.
now I guess they're going all the way through it, right? But I was out on my own in 5 weeks, you know?
So this is not only for new recruits, I mean like rookies, this is for lateral hires too.
Obviously, the academic stuff doesn't apply there, but at some point, you know, you're bringing them in and you are gonna equip them and that sort of thing, so you're gonna want some sort of, you know, period of time that they can guarantee that they're gonna be working for them.
Maybe you have, I'm just off the top of my head, I just saw this the other day, a couple of days ago, and looked at, maybe you have one contract for, you know, true new recruits, that's more like what
The
you've been here.
academy.
And then one for laterals, like Warren saying, it's not as burdensome, maybe it's a little less.
I was planning on staying to begin with, but, you know, that I gotta tell you, I don't know if onsite, I literally had my Tuesday interview with him the day after I signed here. So I don't know if they had it or not, but, back then, almost everybody had it. I don't know how many are doing it now. I'd imagine since everybody's sponsoring, they have one for new recruits.
I know at least for new recruits
Yeah.
that's sponsored through the academy, most other surrounding
Right.
cities are doing something similar to it. I don't know about hiring a sworn officer, or if there's a difference.
That's a very low-cost way of improving our ability to attract pre-certified officers. Very low risk to the city.
So most of the agencies, Heather, here in Volusia County are for new recruits.
Or correct, people that they're sponsoring through the academy.
Have something like this.
And I can find out what other agencies are doing, if in fact anybody's hiring sworn officers. I know they're few and far between these days, but if they are, if they do something similar. I don't know.
I know just from, again, going back to Dwayne, because we were at the table just a couple weeks ago, I know they have hired some people, Greg told me this too, that I think from LA, one from Chicago. So there are some agencies hiring laterals that are trying to get out of maybe less law enforcement friendly places. Certainly understand. So, yeah, maybe if by our next meeting, or if you get the information, want to email it to us, what you have found.
Yeah.
That might help us. All right. Again, thanks for asking for input on it.
Sure. Anything else on that? Do you guys have any additional articles you want to open? I think today is the third meeting, and we said all articles will be open by this meeting.
We'll go ahead and.
Share with you
So, as we discussed, or I sent my email, I took back the wage idea to our members, and they were not for that. They want to continue with the steps we got, so.
That's fine. It was just an idea.
Yep. And I appreciate the thought process, and so we went.
Sure, before we do a lot of work grinding
Yep.
numbers on something like that.
So this one's Article 25, insurance. Health insurance is one of those things that's costly to all our members, or most of our members who have families, and end up paying for it. We do have good plans, but they're just expensive. So I'll let you guys take a look at it and need any explanation. And if I got the names of the plans wrong, I can correct those.
I know what you mean.
I was trying to remember what I discussed on the phone with you.
Heather, it's my understanding, or Matt, anyone, that right now the
Yeah,
bargaining
that's-
unit employees
that's why I
pay
changed it.
100%
Leave now.
healthcare costs.
Correct, so all of our employees from a custodian to the city manager have the same benefit structure. So the city pays 100% for what they call on here the base plan, that's our balanced HMO. Right now, the cost of that's $595 a month. So that's what the city pays, $595 for you, and $595 for you, and $595 for me, and $595 for Matt. No matter what plan you have, that's the cost.
Okay.
Now, if you wanted to buy up to HMO that has no deductible, because our base plan has a $500 deductible, you can buy up to basically a plan that has richer benefits, but you pay a little bit for that. You pay whatever the difference in the premium is that we get charged by the healthcare provider. And then, of course, to add dependence on whatever plan you have. If, for example, let's say you wanted the HMO plan, which is the most expensive plan, and you had your spouse and children covered, let's just say that the cost is $1,500 a month. The city's still going to pay its $585 that they pay for the employee portion. The employee just has to pay the difference of it. Now, for the high deductible health plan, it's a little bit different. That plan is actually cheaper than our base HMO plan. So the city not only pays for the employee costs, they put the difference between the high deductible cost and the HMO cost into the HSA account, which is about $1,200 a year, which the deductible on the HDHP plan is about $1,300, so it almost covers that deductible. So that's kind of how the HDHP with the HSA works. But dependent care coverage is at the employee's cost, no matter which plan you're on. If that makes sense.
The city pays $595 per month at present for all city employees, for the employee only.
Correct.
Any dependents are fully on the employee.
Correct. So if you're single and you have either the high deductible health plan or the base HMO, it's free for the employee. You can either choose to buy up as a single person and pay the difference, or you can have dependents.
Y'all have any questions on this?
No, I was just running some very rough numbers. I will tell you, the health insurance that we pay on an annual, the total bill that we pay is about $4.5 million. I mean, it's pricey. So, to add, city pay, of course, with dependent coverage, depending on how many people have dependent coverage, right? That's the thing, is that not everybody has dependent coverage. So is it 25% of your members have some form of dependent coverage? Is it 30%? With 15, I have no idea what percentage of your members have dependent coverage to be able to truly cost this out. So it would take some numbers crunching to see what that would be. All right, do you guys have anything else? Is it?
Nope, that's it from us,
Okay.
on our side.
So of course, there would be a financial impact if we decided to do something like this. I have prepared a wage counter proposal. If I'm being perfectly upfront and honest, I know we're trying to wrap this up by the end of July. I've put it all out there in the wage proposal, so we can slice it a different way. So if you guys decide the way I've broken this out, you want to structure it a little bit differently, we can work through that. If you guys decide, yeah, we don't want it on the wages, we want to allot some of that dollar value to the insurances, we can discuss those options. But as of right now, it's kind of all in the wage allotment. One of the things to keep in mind is it's not just wages, that's the cost impact. For every dollar, there's 54.55% in pension, plus 7.65 in taxes. So every dollar, it actually costs about $1.60-ish. So just keep that in mind, but we'll go ahead and I've only brought 8 copies. Somebody share them with me there.
Sir, I'm sorry, I'm totally ignoring you.
Yeah, you can have it.
So it's pretty straightforward. I basically added $1 to each step, left the step structure the way it was, and just added $1 to each step. So that was just straight even across the board. We would not be able to agree to the CPI index COLA language that you proposed, but I can throw in range master. So we could throw that one in. I also did remove, it looks like there was maybe leftover language in the last article that wasn't struck through in your proposal, but the one-time lump sum of $500 from last time, I think that was quote in lieu of retro. So I did strike through that as well, with the hopes that we'll have this ratified before October 1st. And we'll have to deal with that.
And I was not present at the last meeting,
We missed
unfortunately.
you, Gary.
Yeah, I know. Just an all-day hearing in West Melbourne. Police hearing. How many steps, I understand the city proposed a reduction in steps.
We did not, it wasn't a formal proposal. We talked about an idea.
An
right?
idea, okay.
And the idea being is if you top out quicker, your
Uh-huh.
final pension calculations are at a higher rate sooner type deal.
Okay.
So it was just a thought to see if there was any appetite to discuss that before we even started crunching any numbers.
Heather or anyone have you done wage comparison studies with, even here in Volusia County?
Sort of. So everybody, so I do know who was negotiating, and there's about half of the cities right now in Volusia County that are negotiating. Basically, everybody who's negotiating police is also negotiating fire. There's only a handful negotiating general employees right now. A lot of the cities have entered into multi-year agreements, so about half of them are negotiating police and fire right now. So I've surveyed them. The problem is everybody's negotiating, so what they're paying today may not be what they're paying tomorrow, so it's been hard to really get some comparison. But I have done a, wage survey of what your rate is as of today. Big question is what's it gonna be tomorrow as everybody works through their negotiations.
Here, the alligator at our ankles, this year and for the next 2 or 3 years is really gonna be this $15 an hour mandate. It's come from our voters, so that's, obviously, Heather's got something here that she's willing to work with you some, but I mean, there's gonna be a significant increase, it would appear, in the millage rate. And, for the next couple of years, we're gonna be trying to figure that out, trying to figure out how to get all the employees that are sub 15 to 15 without completely destroying any of the step structure as well. You're gonna create a lot of compression issues, obviously, and that
The
won't
hard
all
part
solve.
is that compression wasn't addressed in the legislation, right? So there's no mandate that says we have to address compression. Of course, we want to from a morale standpoint, from a fair treatment standpoint, but I've got no mandate justifying to the taxpayers why we're raising the millage rate to address compression, because that wasn't in the legislation. So that's making it that much more challenging to get where we want to be.
I would also just point out that, that starting wage is one that I think is important for our council and one that they'd like to see definitely increase. While Heather said you can cut it the way you want to, I think if you can leave, some money on that initial rate of pay just as a, it's an enticement for recruits. We want to be able to be competitive for hiring new officers, and that's an important number for us as well.
Problem you're running into still though is most places around here are already at $15 an hour, so now you're at $5.50 more to be a cop. And right now is not the best time to be a police officer for any of us. And so
This is definitely another unique year, right? So last year was the pandemic, and that was the challenge last year. We didn't know where the economy was going to go. It was all kind of up in the air. And this year, it's not only we still having the social issues that we have with police. Nobody wants to be a police officer anymore. The applicant pool is smaller, but we do have this $15 an hour mandate where, yeah, we're trying to get people up to $15 an hour to compete with not only neighboring cities, but Wawa and McDonald's and Walmart, who are already there. So having to throw money at that end of the pay scale, right? And then you mess up the compression that it's causing all the way up, and how soon can we do that or how not soon, right? I've heard 3 years, right? That's kind of what other cities are looking at too, is can we get there in 3 years, even though the $15 an hour mandate, you don't have to get there until 2026. If other people are jumping there quicker, the market's driving that movement, right? So even though by law I don't have to be there for the next 5 years, I'm not gonna be able to hire anybody if I don't compete with the neighboring competitors, whoever that may be, and that's changing. I didn't used to have to compete with Buc-ee's, right? But now I do. So, and they're now even offering benefits, whereas a lot of times they traditionally weren't. So it's definitely making it very challenging to where I've got general employees as well as the firefighters are already still below $50 an hour that we've got to work through on what the plan is gonna look like to get in there. How much are we gonna have to increase taxes in order to fund that? Where does the compression land? What's our definition of compression, right? So we haven't defined what compression means, because what compression means to you may be different than what compression means to me. So without having a clear definition of what that means, it's hard for us to tell where we want to be or where we need to be as we kind of work through this over the next couple, 2-3 years.
Just throwing an even dollar at everybody, it rewards the new guys and punishes the longer you've been here. Because
If you're going from a
lower
percentage
of pay.
standpoint.
From a percentage of pay, yeah,
All right,
100%. So now we're saying, we're gonna give 5% to a guy who's been here a year, and right around 3% to a guy who's been here 16, and run that driver. Like 3.3.
I've never been a fan of percentages increase, because if I go, all right, across the board, everyone gets 3%. 3% for you is different from 3% for him.
It absolutely is, and the reason it's different is because of the time and effort I spent with the city. 100% it's different. And it certainly shouldn't go the other way around, where the guy who hasn't worked a single day here is getting a better percentage raise than the guy who's worked here 16 years.
And, you know, a lot of the cities do go on percentages, 3% in year 2 or 4%. For that very reason, what I'm saying is, it really is not a dollar to a 16-year officer is not the same, of course.
Sure, percentage-wise, it is not, and what that does over time, though, is it actually does the opposite of compression. It puts the step between, right? If you're not on a step plan, it puts that space between further, because the 3% for the guy that's making $12 an hour and the 3% for my civil engineer, this is under my general employees
Right.
union, all in the same union, though, we're now expanding that space in between. So it's kind of what your philosophy is, right? So that's the other thing we don't have defined is a pay philosophy and what we define. Do I value experience with the city more than overall experience, right? So if I hire a cop, you know, from New York, let's say, who's 20 years in, do I value that 20-year police officer more than somebody who's been with the city 15 years? Right? You've got city Port Orange experience, but he's got more police officer experience, right? So how do I treat that, right? How do we value those? What do we value more? That's time and grade versus total longevity. We don't have those things defined anywhere to be able to put dollar values on those things.
And Heather, I'm told that in our first proposal, we had steps going to 17 to 20. We have 4 more steps.
Correct.
And 5 more steps for sergeants. Justin says that's about 22% of their membership is beyond 16 years. And the concern I would have, you know, for Chief Proctor or whoever continues to lead this agency is you're sort of setting up a model to attract only young recruits, and you're going to lose the seasoned officers. And you're absolutely right. The pool of candidates is getting more difficult, and they're having to look at now candidates that might have a criminal history. Or I'm hearing this from the recruiters and other
Sure.
agencies here in Volusia County. The kinds of things that used to disqualify someone, they're now having to say, we might have to consider this person because we don't have anybody else. And my point with the upper end, though, is that if you drive these veteran officers out, who say, you know what, if I'm, might as well go ahead and take early retirement, that's not going to benefit having good leadership within the agency. To help train these young officers, some of whom might need a little more guidance because they might be coming from, I mean, Warren, have you been involved in recruiting for the agency?
No, sir.
Is anybody here involved with the background checks or hiring?
No.
Okay.
Never at the moment.
But I would urge the city to think about, I mean, obviously, we're going to consider this, but I get this kind of feeling it's not going to be, sensing it's not going to be well received. I see Justin here crunching numbers, but.
And again, we can, like I said, we can slice it differently. If you want to do a percentage across the board, we can run those numbers to see what it'll be like.
Yeah. But if a fifth of the bargaining unit is 16+ year officers, and I don't know how many are in the sergeant pool from 11 to 15, we'd like the city at least be thinking about some more steps again, because
So help me understand the difference in more steps to where you get increases through your steps, or we just raise the last step? You still get an increase either way. What's the
well,
thought process
okay.
behind that?
Well, so right now, let's take a 20-year officer. He's capped out at 27.79 under the city's proposal, right? And I don't see a seniority bonus some agencies do a seniority bonus from one to, at 5 years, you get a lump sum added, and it goes into FRS or at 10 years, you get a little larger. That's still not ideal. It helps with the city budget because they can budget for that exact dollar. But it's still a sum of money to reward seniority. So I think the concern we have here is that not only are you're not rewarding the more senior officers, 17 and beyond year officers is stuck at the 16-year pay, and same with the sergeant after year 10. And there's no longevity bonus.
So is the concern that you've got, let's say, a 16-year officer, so under this particular proposal, they would still get a pay increase, but you've got a 16-year officer alongside a 20-year officer making the same thing?
Right.
Is that,
Yeah,
so
you got
how
it.
is that different from a 20-year officer and a 23-year officer in your proposal?
Well, in ours,
Is the 20 the magic number? Is something different at 20?
Well, this year's 20 the magic number. It doesn't say we don't go up to 25 next year, or we stop at 20 and out. I mean, that's one of the options that we're gonna play with next year.
your pension is at 25 or 20?
25.
That's another issue you have to come into this with, is that for guys hired after 2011, there is no year. So now you're hiring a guy, and when he gets to 19, he's not getting any more in his pension. He's made as much money as he's gonna make. Now, he'll get that 3% to stay each year,
Whatever
But
the
he's-
annual
but
pay
he's
increase is,
leaving-
right?
but he's leaving 6 years of pension retirement checks coming in to stay here. You understand what I'm saying? So if you get a 16-year guy, well, if you get a 19-year guy, he's topped out. He's not gonna make another dime in his pension to stay here for the 25, which is what we're expecting for the pre-2011 guys. You following?
Sorry, you lost me there.
Okay, so,
So let's just use your proposal, right, because it goes to 20,
Right.
right? So 19 years, they would be making 34.12 under this proposal.
Right.
Okay,
okay,
That's our first proposal.
okay,
right?
yeah,
And then next year, let's say step 19 becomes $35 even or something like that. He still gets a pay increase, or he would go to step 20 and still get a pay increase. And then let's say after step 20, let's say you top out at step 20, but step 20 now becomes $36. Like, he still gets a pay increase. His total annual compensation still goes up for pension purposes, right?
no,
Well,
no, you're not
said-
guaranteed that at all.
No, it's not guaranteed. But
Yeah,
I'm just
it's
saying,
not
whatever we
guaranteed at
negotiate
all.
as the increase,
Right,
if there's an increase to step 20, he gets an increase. He does, not like he's grandfathered in at 34.79 for the next 5 years. He still gets pay increases, whatever we negotiate the new step 20
oh, I
to
see,
be each
yeah,
year.
yeah, assuming it goes up.
assuming it goes up.
Yeah.
Right.
That's an assumption.
There's
Sure, if
pay-
we
there's
get into
years
a
where there's
recession or
there's a
something
pay
like that and go,
freeze,
yeah, we're freezing everything,
Yeah.
I get that, but aside from something like that, typically there's 3%, right? Or the equivalent of, or something along those lines, if we have to do a bigger market adjustment like we did last year.
Right.
Typically, there is some type of increase each year, even to the steps, like we're talking about.
Right,
We're
but the
gonna
guy
increase the
who's
steps.
now, let's say he stays 5 years, the guy who's now 5 years behind him in experience makes the same money that year that he makes. Right?
Correct,
matter
even
what
if
you
you
do
guys
with
go
the
to 20
20,
steps, that, you
yeah.
still have that same
Yeah.
situation. So it doesn't matter where you cap those steps. What I'm hearing is we don't ever want to cap the steps. And of course, I know there's a life, time for a police officer, right? You can only be one physically for so long,
Yeah.
but whether that's 20 or 25 or something along those lines, there would be a cap somewhere to that.
Well, I mean, ideally, and we think that's why the 20 was a good compromise, we would go to 25 to match the retirement, 25
For
years.
the pre-2011 guys. So you
Yeah.
want to go to 25 if you're pre-2011, for
So-
sure.
So we thought our proposal starting, getting it to 20 and then going up incrementally so the city can learn, begin to absorb and expect it, that we would cap it at 25. I don't see any reason to go beyond 25. But that's why 20 we felt was a.
And I think that was the mentality behind shorter steps was you topped out sooner for pension purposes, right? So if my top out is now 25, but what if I came from another
Yeah, but
agency,
you're
right?
arguing against then the pre-2011 employees. That's a great argument for the post-2011 employees, but it hurts the pre-2011 employees,
I mean,
which is
Yeah.
basically half your workforce at this point, although that is dwindling.
Sure, and it's one of those things that it will transition over time, and
Yeah.
maybe just our, negotiations and what we do needs to transition slowly along with that.
And one way to look at this is New Smyrna is on a 20-year vest, a 20-year pension program, and they went down at last negotiations from 10% employee contribution to 8%. I think you're at 8% right now.
The
7.5
post
and 8 for
2011,
pre and
yeah.
post, yeah.
And that would be another way to be thinking is maybe to lessen that.
Yeah, and I think you get a lot more appetite for shortening the steps once the pre-2011 guys are out.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Again, I'm just trying to wrap my brain around what the thought process is on your side so that we can meet
Yeah.
somewhere in the middle on this.
Is that the breakdown, about 50/50 right now?
It's a little bit better for the post-2011, but it's not hugely in that way, because almost all of your sergeants are pre-2011.
In 2011 is when the,
That's when
Oh,
the contract
okay.
changes
Yeah.
came, yeah.
Heather, since you started before you passed this out saying you were not sugarcoating it, is this sort of the max of what the city's number, the budget you have?
Probably then a little bit, so yeah, that's dollars wise again. Unfortunately, we've got to factor in pension and taxes because that's the total cost to the city with it. So my total cost, I've got to slice all that up. That's factored into it, but we can run different numbers for sure.
Are did the city receive any of the monies from the feds through the
We did, we received
coronavirus?
about $2 million last year that we used to reimburse wages in 2020.
Can any of that be used for wages?
So you
going
can't
forward?
use one-time expenses for recurring costs, right? So the analogy that the city manager has been using is we've got a great savings account, but I can't use my savings account to pay my light bill and pay my water bill because those come every month. At some point, your savings account's gonna dwindle and you just don't have enough money coming in the door.
Is that statutory or that's our, because as I understand it, that's our premise. I agree with you as a city, but I just want to make sure that's not statutory. No, there's no reason
No.
why you couldn't use it one time.
Sure, now we do have, our
Yeah,
city
business.
policies
Right, it's
say,
bad business, agreed.
right, our
But I
city
just wanna
policy
make sure
says,
that
I think
that's
we'll
clear.
maintain a certain amount of fund balance, right, for emergency purposes. So
But
I
it's
think
like
as
well
long as
over
we're in
that.
accordance with that, right, so we've been discussing one-time costs, right? So maintenance repairs, this building needs a new roof, or city hall needs a new air
Instead of
conditioner.
budgeting for that, use that money for the budget elsewhere and use the one-time cost out of the savings.
So ultimately, I think how to get there is, in order to get the money to continually come in, that's you do it
We're
through
keeping the
taxes.
coffers really packed and loaded, but then we're paying we're broke. So that's a problem that, we see, and, that's a public record request that we got, so.
Yeah, that was my understanding that those monies could be used for it. Just wanted to hear.
It can be, like, it would get us through for a year, right? But then we dwindle out that savings account and go, well, how do we pay for next year? There's no more money in savings, right? So where does that money come from to fund it the following year? I think that's the situation we don't want to put ourselves in.
Is there any thought by management to providing a longevity or a longevity bonus?
Not opposed to
That
it,
would be pensionable.
not opposed to it with the option to roll it into 457 if you wanted to, or take the payout, we do that. I know we did that before, I think with the police lieutenant, where we had somebody who wasn't in with everybody else and said, okay, you don't get a pay increase till everybody catches up, but we'll give you a, payout type that you can, we'll roll you 457, something along those lines, so I'm not opposed to it.
Could we maybe crunch some numbers on the people that would be beyond hypothetically 16 years and just Because that would be the people impacted the most. I think it says 22% of the membership.
Last I looked at. Gotta check it.
No,
Okay. Could you,
it may be a little over for the new hire now.
Yeah, we gained a
Staff,
couple,
but it's roughly.
I think as of next month, fully staffed is what I heard. I mean, they're still in the academy and going through that process, but I think we'll at least have all the
Fully
ones in
staffed
seats.
that's a
That's a relative term, but
very fancy looking painting. They're all in school.
I believe we'll have butts in seats. We won't have any vacancies now. Whether they're all on the road, it's a different story, but
Yeah.
Yeah, you're still
Hopefully-
operating with 6 on each ship.
for a year down the road, we'll be in much
Minimal
better
staff.
shape and we won't have
A little.
these high overtime costs that I know have been going on for the last year and a half. To hopefully start to stave some of that off.
Yeah. any of you have any questions about the numbers?
I think the only thing with the wages is you're still just fighting we're so behind the hill. And I just see this as we have an opportunity to get ahead of it and we're not taking it. And we're not gonna convince people to come to this agency. We're not gonna convince people in other agencies to come here because they're like, why? Why would I come there? We're already behind the track with the land in New Smyrna and Daytona Beach. And even people can say all they want about Daytona, well, it's a higher crime rate. Well, yes, but they're paying for that. They're paying those guys and they're treating them well. And those guys that, you ask those guys, why do you like being there? Wow, I worked for 20 years. Wages are good. There's lots of overtime. There's stuff to do. So it's that wellness of being at work. Right now, we're just come here, and then if you have 5 people that are on the road every day, you're burning out. These guys are getting burned. I mean, we're getting burned out. And I know, and I appreciate the recruiting, and I tell our recruiting officer all the time, I appreciate all the work he's doing. But we're throwing seeds in the ground. We're hoping something's gonna grow. We're having trainees that are out of the school, or so I don't want to do it anymore. Or family issues come up, or we had one guy that he just basically said, "Never mind, I applied somewhere else. I'm not interested." And I completely understand the recovery side of these wages. So, the recruitment's it's a big deal, but you're not attracting these guys that we would like to be here, that have already been involved in police work, and we know that they're not going to be frightened away from it. We're trying to take, guys my age, when I started, I was 20, 21 years old, and it's progressively worse right now. And you might have I may not even have maybe come into this job. I most likely probably wouldn't have in the environment it is. So how do you convince a guy like me who has no military, just trying to be educated, and maybe I don't want to do it? So we're attracting that. Not that it's a bad thing, because maybe they push through it and they stay, but the probability is better with guys that are already in law enforcement, like Sergeant Carmen saying. He has prior, so if he came from another agency and we were in the same exact climate, it wouldn't faze him because he's used to it. So we're paying, there's less likelihood of him deciding, oh, I don't want to be here, where this environment is not welcoming. So we need to attract this, and we need to get these guys to want to stay here. I mean, I hate being the person that throws out the other, the Buc-ee's thing, but it's true, and we have to acknowledge it. Amazon delivery right now is going to pay you $20.13 an hour to drive around and throw packages on doorsteps. And not get shot at, not get attacked by people trying to sue the city every 6 seconds, not have to, deal with hazards, medical hazards. We're becoming more and more like medical rescue nowadays too now. We're with the constant overdoses. I mean, our task has broadened quite a bit.
So this survey it's from May, and like I said, it's kind of a moving target. To my knowledge, nobody's contract has expired that they would have settled since then. But So the shore, Daytona Beach Shores is at 2056, but they're triple certified in firefighter and police officers, and I think EMTs. But New Smyrna Beach was at 2046.
So that's
Daytona
their
Beach was at
non-certified ones though, aren't they? Right, because they're certified, triple certified is 23 something an hour.
probably 2056.
I think that's their that's just their law.
And they're low staff,
Oh, okay.
because they're leaving.
But I've got, so 2056, 2046, Daytona Beach is 20, Volusia County is at 1967, and the land was at 1956, and then we're right now at 1950.
Mhm.
Now, out of those, I will tell you,
The land is negotiated.
I was gonna say, I've also got, so
Orange City.
Daytona Beach, Holly Hill, DeLand, Orange City, and the county are all negotiating right now. So it's just a moving target, but in this, okay, 2050 got me in the ballpark of where everybody else was at.
Sure.
What are they gonna do? I just don't know, right? They don't know, because they're doing the back and forth like we are. So
Sure.
where we all end up, I don't know, but at least it was getting me to where they were,
Yeah.
right? And then, well, okay,
But like, what we're still not taking into consideration for all this is the inflation, because minimum wage is going up that 15.61% just this year.
Right.
Next year is 10. We're getting so far behind that in 3
from a
years, 4
compression
years.
standpoint, right? So
Yeah,
that's the
compression,
conversation I
and
had
that's-
earlier, going, what is compression? How are we gonna address
Well,
it? Because the
compression,
legislation doesn't say
it's-
that I have to address it. How much is it gonna cost taxpayers in order to address it?
But you're gonna have a
I
hard
think-
time selling the cop that the minimum wage got deserved 15%.
But I think that's
raise,
part
yeah.
two, right? I think first
think
is I
you're gonna
have
have
to
a
figure
really
out how to
hard
comply
time
with the
selling
law and get there. And I've got people
I
that
should
will
say,
live there.
we're gonna have a hard time selling. We're
No
gonna
doubt.
have a really hard time going back and saying, yeah, the guy who's making minimum wage for the city is getting a 15% raise this year, and we wanna give you between 3 and 5.
I just don't think we can do
The
it all in
gas,
one year. Right? You
food.
can't do it all in one fell swoop, it's just too much. So I think the compression is like a part two. So
Well,
what Delana did is
but
Delana.
to be honest, that's not on
July
us.
1st.
That's not on us,
That's on the taxpayers.
right?
Right.
We
So
voted
the
it.
taxpayers
that's-
voted for $15 an hour, right? So the argument that I've heard,
Right.
right, was
They're
They
arguing
didn't vote
for,
for
so they need
compression.
to expect the tax increase that's coming to pay for the $15 an hour mandate that they
And that's how
gave.
council,
And that's how they explain it.
we're working
Right.
on that. We're
Look,
working on
voted
that.
this in.
That's
It's gonna be really hard for me to go back and tell my guy who can't pay his bills that employee X is getting 15% this year and you're getting 3.
Right, so
It's
what
gonna be
Deland
really
did was
hard for me.
Deland went to $15 an hour July 1st, and they're addressing compression in the next fiscal year, right? They're kind
Right.
of taking it in two parts, so I think there's gonna have to be,
because everything's going up. I saw, lumber's up 125%.
But it's hard for me to sell,
part of that supply chain though, because of COVID.
Right.
There's so many moving parts and pieces to this.
but it's hard for me to sell next year again.
Yeah.
Because all I do is go back and say next year, next
I
year,
think
next
that's been the last
Yeah.
15, 16
Yeah.
years.
year. Since I've been here, it's all next year. We'll get.
And if
we'll get
this,
straight.
if the city council and the city manager could be persuaded that it's great to have this extra $2 million in the coffers for a rainy day. Well, it's kind of a rainy day, for law enforcement especially, and to be encouraged to maybe make one good big adjustment this year. Because you're right, I mean, nobody knows what the future holds, but we do know what the present is, and that is, it's a challenging environment created in part by the taxpayers who voted that wage increase in, but that has an impact on first responders and personnel services and people. We live in a state where at least law enforcement is still respected, I think. We're not in a defund the police environment. So I think we should encourage the council and city manager to, maybe you don't have $2 million extra in the budget, but put $500,000 towards a nice increase to your law enforcement and maybe police or firefighters too, but your first responders, the people that are out there on the front lines, because most citizens still want police protection. They do. So
Just throw it out there, and I apologize for missing the first two. I just had previous engagements. So I can sell them maybe this for this year with knowing what they're going to get next year. If we can get the city to commit on a contract next year, wages next year, then I might sell it, right? But I can't say it's going to be better next year. Right? I can say, listen, they got to move the minimum wage guys, so this is what we're getting this year. But next year, y'all are getting a $250 raise, a 15% raise, or something like that. I can sell that all day long, right? But I can't sell it with, trust me, it's going to be better next year. I can't do that.
I'm definitely not telling you that. I'm just saying, let's
Right.
talk about it next year.
Right,
We
exactly.
don't know what the future
Yeah,
holds. right?
exactly,
So
right.
that's
So-
the hard part. And I
so-
think that's the hesitation of committing is, we just don't know what the future holds.
Right,
We don't know
yeah.
what situation we're gonna be in next year, and what we'll be able to afford next year. And I think that's really our hesitation in committing for more than 1 year at a time. Do I want to be back here every year? Absolutely not.
Right.
But I think because these are unprecedented times, right?
Right.
Everything seems to be an anomaly to what the norm typically is.
Right.
I think just we're in the state of flux right now.
But this could
so-
probably sell if we had something to guarantee them next year.
Maybe. Maybe. We'll see how you do that.
We work at this together.
Yeah.
I think we all want the same thing, right? I
Yeah.
think our goal is the same, it's just, can we get there,
Yeah.
right? How do we get there?
I mean, even with salary incentives on the front end that you all heard about, the sheriff's office, Bush County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Chipwood has got his own academy now, and he's throwing money, and there's still, and Brody told me, there's still like 60 deputies down. I mean, so even with and I think it's as I understand it, a stair step to get to 7,000, like you get one chunk of it if you complete the academy, one chunk after your 6-month anniversary, and a third chunk. We're not suggesting that for the city. Cities may not be able to afford it, and probably can't, but there ought to be some way to realize that that's the kind of market that you're in, that you're going to be competing with other agencies that it is moving, each one's renewing at different times, and then a sheriff who's also aggressively trying to hire, and he's hiring laterally too, if he can, because he would prefer not to have a new trainee.
Sure.
But I think to go to Jared's point too, with your current proposal only going up $1, and then you hit somebody with this contract on the front end, I mean, that's a double-edged sword to say, well, gosh, why would I go? If they have another option, if they don't have to sign such an agreement at New Smyrna Beach or DeLand, or, I haven't seen one of these. Now, I'm not saying they don't have them, you probably know better than I, but this was the first time we've been asked to weigh in on it. So maybe they are in other departments, but I've not heard from Greg Cook that they are, or anyone else that they are, but, you know, these are business agents for other agencies over here. But we want to work with the city and try to come to some resolution that serves the city, serves the chief, and hopefully can get buy-in by our people as well.
Yeah, so I'm not opposed to slicing this up a different way. If we want to do percentage increase somehow, if we want to do longevity bonuses, you know, for those rather than increased steps, we can kind of talk through those options. I'm open to that.
We want to, I guess we should probably just schedule another date to get together then.
Yeah.
So,
Fairly soon.
yeah, I'm out of the office from, excuse me, July 14th through the 23rd. So I don't know how soon you would be ready.
You said you're out July when, or
The
when?
14th, the next Wednesday through the following Friday, so a weekend.
For the week of the 26th. Could work.
I said, or if you guys think the 12th or the 13th, you guys have availability those days.
13th,
Can't do
Yeah,
13.
otherwise we'll be there too.
And the 12th is only 5 days from now. It'll give you a chance to talk to your leadership.
No, that'd be quick to turn around.
You can look at the week of the 26th.
26th.
26th. Would the 27th or 28th work?
27.
27 is better for this one.
Okay.
The 27th or 27th?
27,
27th works for me, I'm open
afternoon?
all day,
Yeah, afternoon. That's for,
like the 1 o'clock. Does that work for you guys?
Okay.
perfect.
Okay.
Go ahead and we'll get this room reserved again, and we'll go ahead and get the notice out and everything, and we'll plan for that.
The one thing I want to say too, because I'm getting a lot of angry text messages, is it's like Sergeant Farman saying is, you know, the next year thing, it gets really old, and I haven't been here that long, and he's heard it a lot longer, and so does Justin. And what I'm afraid of is next year we'll be in a better position, and next year is going to be a bank crash, a mortgage crash.
Yeah, please
this
don't
crash.
misunderstand me, I'm not telling you next year's gonna be better, I'm just
I
telling
think
you,
that's what we
here's
were
what we
told.
can do this
Right.
year, and
What I'd
this
like-
may be
We were
better.
told that last year.
I think that's the
It's
hesitation
COVID, next
of,
year will be better.
Right.
Here's the crash we're at right now. I think we're at law enforcement crash. And what I'd like to see from the city council and from the city is the response to the law enforcement crash of going, okay, we have money. We know the city government's not falling apart, the housing market, taxes are being paid. We need to get ahead of this, because if next year we do have a something we cannot control, then we do come to the table, we're open to it. We did last year with COVID.
We're not so
We
far
said,
behind.
yeah, we understand this is a really crappy year, but we're not there right now. We're having a law enforcement crash problem. So I'd like to see us get ahead of it. We just did the 4th of July detail, and we had to have all of 2 shifts. The 2 shifts that were off had to come and work it because of the staffing concerns. We all had to come in. So, there's the city enjoys it because they're saying, oh, they could say everything is safe. And I'm glad we presented such a good thing that those fireworks went off. We didn't have fights. We didn't have crimes. Everyone felt safe and protected, happy. But they don't understand that we were at max. We were at max trying to get people in. In the shift I was working, I think they had 5 people that night, 5 or 6 people working for the entire city. So we're at that point where I think we need to see some type of incentive, something that the city government needs to go, okay, we need to see if we can get ahead of this in the event that there is a problem next year and we can't go, it's something in our control. We can't negotiate hard that next year. We can't give them a more rewarding thing. This year, let's try to get ahead of it while we have the funds and keep these people, make sure that they're happy, whatever it is, and incentivize the current academies that we're trying to deal with, incentivize the current recruits. Because I get the recruiting side all the time. What I'm afraid of is with this active negotiations and these recruits go, I don't want to do it anymore. And then they put in their app at Ormond, DeLand, or New Smyrna, or Seminole County. They get a little bit over because there's some larger incentive. That's just what I want. I want the city council to hear this and just kind of understand that.
I think another thing you gotta deal with is that our insurance benefits are much more expensive than neighboring cities, the county included, much more expensive. So even if we're making the
In the fact of what
same,
the actual cost is, or the
What
fact
we're
that
paying.
other cities pay towards dependent
yes,
coverage?
what we're paying towards coverage is much higher than other cities and the county. And
New
that
Smyrna
is,
pays 50%.
yeah,
For everybody?
the county is about half of what ours is. What they're paying, about half. And they're making more money, well, the county at the present isn't, but I would be willing to bet at the end of their negotiations that we started to get more money.
They'll definitely be making more money.
Yeah. So they're not only taking home more money, but the benefits are costing them less. And so their net take-home pay is considerably higher than ours. We can do the gross numbers, and I understand that that's how the city has to do it. I get it. But there are other factors at play here. And one of the biggest of which is that we've got brand new guys making $19.50 an hour, trying to pay nearly $800 a month in family insurance, right?
And then trying to pay.
Trying to pay for a place to live and a car to drive and something to eat. And the 8% into the pension, which is high in some cases, like with the state, or low with the private ones, right? We're the same as New Smyrna, and we're a little bit below. They told us still at 10 last I knew.
Yeah, so I'll see if I can get some updated, I don't know that if I can get them by the 26th, but some updated insurance comparisons, because the last time that I compared insurances, we were actually one of the cheapest total costs, right, for premiums, but nobody else was paying dependent coverage except for Deltona, and Edgewater paid it for grandfather employees. So things may have changed, right?
Yeah,
the
New Smyrna-
New
negotiations,
Smyrna's
so-
definitely.
Yeah.
Right, so,
Yeah.
but, so then you have to look at the overall picture, right? So, okay, maybe you pay less for health insurance, but you're paying more into your pension, right? So that's where you have to look at the total package, and that's where, again, it starts to
And-
get swirly and complicated. right?
And
how
I
you wanna
hope we
slice
do
those
that
dollars.
I hope we're looking at that at the other agencies, because I'm telling you, that is the absolutely positively, the biggest thing is not how much money they're making an hour, is how much they're paying out for the same benefits that other places are getting. That's a huge problem.
So like I know in Ormond, they don't even have an HMO plan. Their base health insurance plan is a high deductible health plan. So yeah, maybe I'll put towards family coverage, but you now have a $2,600 deductible that you have to come out of pocket with that point of service, right? So it gets really hard to compare apples to apples when you start getting into some of those details, right? So,
I think it would be easiest to do with their starting salary, what their family insurance costs, and what they contribute to their pension, and run the numbers, and I think you'll find there's a significant difference in what they're taking home than what our guys are.
how does paid time off factor into that, or does it at all?
That is not a complaint I've heard. And I'm not sure how our paid time off, I mean, the new guys are only getting 100 hours a year.
Right.
For the
So
length
is
of their
this paid time
career.
off a factor in this overall benefit package? Does it, right? So when I start looking at numbers, going, oh yeah, our PTO blows everybody else away, but the health insurance doesn't, or vice
Right.
versa.
I
right?
know that,
Doesn't make a
I know
difference.
that in our meeting, at least one person brought up, hey, I'd love to have some more paid time off. You know, because he's post 2011, he's gonna get 100 hours for his entire career.
For what you're describing.
And then the other problem we have with paid time off is minimum staffing issues,
Can't take it
right?
now.
And it's use it or lose it for the post 2011 guys. So I may have 400 hours on the books, but if I put in for it and keep getting denied, having that 400 hours doesn't do me any good.
That's why I wonder how it plays into the overall total compensation package, right? Does it make a difference
I
or
think it
not?
plays some role, but it's probably minor.
Yeah.
It's, you
Yes,
rank
I
them,
think it's-
salary, insurance cost, and pension contribution are the big three, because
Right.
that all affects your net take-home pay, you know, other than taxes, but I mean,
Right.
that all factors into what's your real, you know, what are you really earning when you look at pension contribution, insurance costs, and salary. You know, like you said, PTO and accrued leave is good. It's probably fourth of those four, would you say, but it's not as big as those other two.
All right.
And I can send you the wage, the pension, insurance article with New Smyrna if you'd like.
Okay, yeah, if you have that handy, that would be great.
But yeah, Justin's right, and it's been over a year with their contract, but I believe it is 50% what the city
So
covers
that's
for
what
dependents.
the Utilities Commission in New Smyrna pays, so I would imagine for them regionally, like, in order to stay competitive with the Utilities Commission, they probably adopted a similar type model for that. We lose a lot of, I don't say lose a lot, but the Utilities Commission, we've almost said we can't even compare ourselves to them because they're not fully public sector, that they can do a lot more than we can, but we tend to lose our utilities guys to them. Insurance is one of them, right? So it would not surprise me if New Smyrna did that, to be on par with the Utilities Commission in New Smyrna Beach, because that's what they do. All right, that gives us some homework to work on then for the next couple of weeks. Reconvene on the
Yeah.
27th.
Yes, thank you all very much.
Sounds
So
good.
Gary, the
Thank you, guys.
tuition, uniform, books, test is $3,400.
34.
Tuition, uniforms, and books.
All the college expenses are about $3,400.
Thank you, Chief. Tuition,